on Prime Crime.
It might be somebody that you want to have sex with or somebody that you might want to kill.
Both.
Our continuing story of renowned serial killer Samuel Little.
When he put their hands around our throat, he wanted them to swallow so he could feel their Adam's apple.
Strangling women. I had that in me for psychological, I guess.
What made him tick?
What's really interesting here is the type of victims that he selected and his relationship with his mother.
What it was like to speak with him.
When you see his hands, you'll see just how monstrous they are. He may still murder that person, even though he was 70 years of age.
And do we know about all of his crimes?
Tell me about Mary Ann.
She's what you nowadays they call a transgender.
Hey there everybody, I'm Jesse Weber and welcome to Prime Crime. This is where we do a deeper dive into the most high profile and memorable true crime cases. This is part 2 of our analysis of Samuel Little, the most prolific serial killer in United States history. Previously on Prime Crime.
I grabbed her by the legs and pulled her to the water. That's the only one that I ever killed by drowning.
We know of at least 93 women who were murdered. He actually told police that he found it sexually satisfying to rape and kill women. He was not going to stop.
But it was squeezing hard enough for the breath could be cut off.
Because he did this same MO over and over again, he got very good at it. The prosecutors and the police were able to actually pin a case on him until he left his DNA.
California actually had a case where they had run DNA on a cold case. DNA came back to an identical person in Sam Little.
For years, Sam Little proclaimed his innocence, but after a jury convicted him of murdering 3 women, he began to confess.
You're so valuable to society at this point, I think.
Well, I hope I can clear up some of it.
This guy definitely was ready to talk as soon as he knew that he wasn't going to be receiving the death penalty.
I had this black chick up in the car. Just got through killing them.
I absolutely believe in his credibility and the stories that he told.
And soon, cold cases, sometimes decades old, started to be solved.
I'll go back to the same city sometime and pluck me another grape. I said, how many grapes? Y'all got on to buying him.
Sure.
That one, I know.
There's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Through Little's interviews with authorities and the media, we've developed a clear picture of his killings, how he was finally caught, and why he ultimately confessed. But let's take a step back. How did Sam Little become Sam Little? Sometimes, to get to the end, you have to start at the beginning. New York Times bestselling author Jillian Lauren knows that well, as she spent hours interviewing and studying Little.
I speak with his family. They ask me all the time, how did this happen? Why? Early childhood, sexual abuse, physical abuse.
Yeah,
Because you were born in 1940, right?
I was born in 1940, yeah.
Okay.
He went to reform school for stealing a bicycle. It's called Boys Industrial School in Ohio. His family will also tell me he was nothing but trouble even before he went there. Then he just got abused and abused and abused.
He grew up in Georgia. His mother was 16 when she was pregnant, and she was in the sex worker industry.
He talked about his mother. His mother had left him on the street corner when he was described it as being so young. He was almost a toddler.
What's really interesting here is the type of victims that he selected and his relationship with his mother. The victims that he chose were very vulnerable. They were sex workers. Some of them were addicted to drugs. These were low-income minority neighborhoods.
She was an alcoholic, and she couldn't catch her trick no more. She was in a position where a whore that couldn't do nothing more.
The women in Little's life arguably defined him and also shaped his criminal career. That includes his longtime girlfriend, Aurelia Jean Dorsey.
You were a traveling man all your life, right? How did you make money to buy cars, shoplifting?
Me and my old lady, Jean she was 70 some years. She about 30 years older than me.
And he met her in jail in 1970. And that was who was shoplifting all the goods that allowed him to travel from state to state to state, city to city, killing these prostitutes. So he was a thief by day and a killer by night.
She's a shoplifter, and I was the driver, and we go all over the country, everywhere. I stop in places overnight in the motels. She's an old lady, you know, and I go out the street looking for a girl. That's how I got around so many places.
From 1971 until Dorsey's death in 1988, Little and Dorsey made quite the team, whether she realized it or not.
Because of her, you were able to kind of go around, right? Because she had the money coming in.
Yeah,
right? She knew you were going out with women.
Yeah, she knew.
But she didn't know that there was like killing going on.
No, right? She didn't know I was going that far.
I kind of wonder if she was this maternal replacement figure, and so there was this respect and adoration towards her.
Aside from the reported 47 disciplinary infractions he received at reformatory school, in his younger years, Little was repeatedly arrested for burglaries and even assault. However, it was in 1970 when things really change.
The first victim I had was in by January, February of 1970.
Okay.
Over in Miami, Coconut Grove, Miami.
Yeah. First killing. Did you know that you wanted to kill her?
Yeah. Yeah, I had desire, strong desire to f***ing kill her.
Coming up, inside the mind of a serial killer.
Strangling women. So I had that in me for, well, psychological, I guess. Pulled the her body out and rolled it down there. And I heard a secondary roll of noise. That meant she was still rolling.
Convicted murderer Samuel Little spent his youth in and out of trouble for various offenses, but it's believed that on January 31st, 1970, Little killed his first victim, Mary Brosley. This was the start of a 35-year killing spree, which Little claims resulted in 93 murders. So why did he start? Well, for one, only 4 years earlier, he had been arrested for assaulting a different woman.
I believe that was the impetus for him to say, I will not leave a witness alive again.
Yet Little's interviews with investigators and the media revealed another motivation for not only how he ended up choosing his victims, but how he killed them.
One of the themes that we believe in reference to Sam Little was the neck. He was excited by the victim's neck.
You pick the ones that you think you're going to kill
No,
first?
no. If the one depends on how the neck looks. Got a smooth neck and turned. As a child, I got attracted to
the neck part.
Yeah.
So you pick them out by the way that their neck looks, because if the neck looks good, then there might be somebody that you want to have sex with, or somebody that you might want to kill. What's the thought? Both. Okay.
When he put their hands around our throat, he wanted them to swallow so he could feel their Adam's apple. If it was a pretty neck, you were probably going to be a victim. If you had an ugly neck, maybe not so much.
But the other stuff really don't be important to me. She could be skinny and narrow.
Right.
She could be ugly.
She could be fat. She could be skinny.
Yeah, she ain't gonna be fat because the fat one's next is
right. Too much. Right. Yeah.
He actually felt that he could have murdered before 1970. He used to touch women's necks while he would be engaged with sex with them.
You had that desire before that?
I had it, but it wasn't.
But you never did it all the way?
Never did it.
All the way.
No, never
just
did
the choking, but never all the way to death?
Never all the way to death.
Okay.
But it was a fantasy of his. And when he did it, it was easy, and it was something then that he didn't want to stop doing.
He just went out of control, I guess.
And then after that, it was...
build up crescendo.
Interestingly, Sam Little's last known murder occurred in 2005. That was 7 years before his eventual capture. So why did he stop?
Little got old, and that's why he stopped in 2005 at the age of 65. That's a career. He still had the same urges to kill women, but physically he was failing. He knew that he might get caught if he continued to try to physically kill a woman, and then, more importantly, tried to get rid of their body.
Sam Little's criminal career of sexual assault and murder can be characterized in many ways, but how Little himself views what he did, well, that's something he was very particular about.
He's a man that did not want to admit that he raped anyone. In his own mind, he wanted to be known as a killer rather than somebody that would have to take by force sex from the woman.
While we were dancing, she says, you want to go riding after this, after this party's over? So she had arm in arm, walking to the car.
He is very invested in the idea that he does not hate women. He loves women.
North Little Rock. Tell me what that girl looked like.
Oh man, I loved her.
Most people luckily don't have to know about the mechanics of strangulation, but it hurts. And he did hate women.
And then I would, then we went further, and I choked her to death.
Little was an erotic aggression subtype of rapist. And these rapists choose women who are vulnerable. They like to control them. They act out very aggressively and they act on impulse. This subtype is the least common of all subtypes, with only about 10% of serial rapists having this erotic aggression.
He was so attached to this idea that he didn't hurt them, and God made him the way he is. God gave me this twisted desire where sex and death got all twisted up inside of me like a pretzel.
That was my weakness. I guess I never could get that out of my mind, mixed up with sex.
And he would say, well, killing somebody is no different than stealing a cookie from a cookie jar, because every sin is the same, and that's Jesus and that's the Bible. And I said, actually, I think there's kind of a hierarchy. What's the first commandment? An answer. Don't wave this book around as a justification for killing women if you never read it. He was killing women for sex. That was sex for him.
When we return, sitting across from a murderer.
Yeah, he was scary to be around. Like psychologically, he's frightening.
Why did you look down here?
I was trying to find a place to put the body.
Oh, I see.
Beginning in 2018 and already serving life sentences for multiple murders, serial killer Samuel Little decided to confess to his killings in a series of interviews. This helped investigators solve many unanswered questions about numerous cold cases. What was truly amazing, though, was Little's ability to recall details of his crimes from decades earlier.
Las Vegas. Describe the Las Vegas victim.
That was in '93. She was kind of thin, dark skinned, about 40 years old. She was out there hustling.
How tall was she?
She was about 5'5", 5'3".
When we were speaking to him, he would go from talking to us in the third person to all of a sudden being there. And he would have a far off look as if he's right there doing it.
Way over here behind a furniture factory. Parked right there. And if we had to get this choked out.
He was able to say specifically where he dumped her body, down a hole.
Steps go down, led down to the basement, but it had a rail around it too, where you couldn't fall down them steps. You had to go around to the steps. So I threw her down the steps.
Mr. Little had a very keen memory. It was almost photographic. He never took trophies. His trophy was up here in his mind. He would relive in his jail cell, in his holding cell, each of these killings over and over again.
Remember some young lady you dumped
in them tires?
With the tires?
Oh, that's her?
Well, yeah, you tell us.
Oh, God, yeah. That's her.
What do you remember about her?
Them eyes and that face.
During his confessions, he is smiling, he's reminiscing, it's nostalgic for him. I think that these were good times for him.
Little also shocked the world by actually drawing sketches of his victims, which investigators have been using to solve these cold case murders.
He remembered some of the names of the victims. He remembered wardrobe, he remembered buttons on some of their clothing and zippers. This went back all the way to the 1970s. It takes a special type of intelligence to have that ability.
I saw that he drew petechial hemorrhaging in their eyes, which is what happens when you strangle women. I was looking for evidence. I was like, what's the detail that he noticed about them that could possibly connect it to a confession, connect it eventually, hopefully, to a cold case, to a Jane Doe.
The people who interviewed Sam Little found themselves in a unique position. They were there to find out more information about these killings. Yet in the process, they became close to a brutal murderer.
We started writing letters. He sent me a Christmas letter, and he talked about wanting to help me solve any case that he thinks he did. If I would send him the information, he will do whatever he could.
Our conversations veered from sports, boxing, my kids, my meatloaf. He liked to hear what it was like to actually be a human being. It made him feel like one for a minute. And then he would talk about murdering.
Despite any pleasantries or bonding, don't for 1 second think that interviewers ever forgot who they were speaking to.
I'll just say that when you see his hands, you'll see just how monstrous they are. I didn't feel in danger myself because I knew that he didn't mind men. If my daughter were in that room alone, if anyone's daughter was in that room, he may still murder that person, even though he was 70 years of age. He felt he could get away with it, he would.
Did you ever shoot any of these girls?
Shoot.
Yeah, with a gun?
My hands.
Just your hands?
And without that, I wouldn't want to do it.
He was really scary. I was always sort of calculating how long it could take to really do damage and how long it would take for a guard to get to me. Like psychologically, he's frightening.
Up next, do we know about all of Little's killings, or are there more? Stay with us.
Think all court shows are the same?
We're talking about your father. Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Think again. Judge Caprio rules with common sense.
I was having contractions. I was rushing to the hospital.
Inspector Quinn, what does justice demand? Jail?
And compassion.
I'm going to take the circumstances into consideration.
The best court experience I've had.
Clearly, Judge, he's been in a court before.
Get caught in Providence.
Hi, I'm Dan Abrams. In the exploding legal and true crime genre, Law and Crime is the only network that has it all.
Good evening and welcome.
This is a complicated case.
Don't really jump to conclusions.
Welcome to Prime Crime Tonight. Another day of drama between both sides.
From multiple live trials daily to original and compelling programming, the Law and Crime Network is everywhere, and we invite you inside the jury box. This is Law and Crime.
What, do you think her body might have been hidden where you dumped her over that fence? Or do you think somebody would have found it eventually?
Yeah, I think it's very rare they could have found her.
Through serial killer Samuel Little's confessions, law enforcement and prosecutors from different states were able to solve dozens of cold case investigations, and Little was finally convicted and sentenced to multiple life terms of imprisonment for several murders. At the time of this taping, over half of his killings have been confirmed.
He spoke about 93 different cases. So far, from my understanding, 62 different female bodies have actually been identified as his killings. And I'm sure that there are more bodies out there.
There's a continuing investigation still going on with the ones that were never identified. And we know some of these weren't listed as homicides, they were listed as either overdose deaths or they fell off a ravine. Sometimes the damage wasn't really available to say that it was a homicide. And some of these were mislabeled.
I wish the hell I didn't, but it can't be turned back. Not only hers, but more that I'm regretful for, and I'm constantly saying I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Well, for this family, they have closure now. You know, you've confessed to it, you've told us what you did, how you did it, why you did it, and I personally thank you for that.
Is it possible, though, that Little told investigators everything? Or could he be responsible for more killings that we don't know about?
He I believe he's responsible for about the number that he actually said, 93. I found him to be very credible as far as that. He was not boasting. He was very matter of fact. He wasn't trying to be the worst of the worst.
My only suspicion is that there might be men.
Tell me about Mary Ann.
She's what you nowadays they call a transgender.
There are 3 transgender women in his victims in the confessions. If there are victims he did not confess to, I think there were men.
While the work continues to verify Little's crimes, unfortunately for authorities, he can no longer help. Samuel Little died in 2020.
He was rattled at the end. He was definitely going downhill. He would say, I'm not on my deathbed yet, but I've done everything in this life now but die. And I was like, no, you haven't, because you're going to help me and we're going to find more of these victims. Sam made me his next of kin. His family doesn't want anything to do with him. So I got the call. I'm still dealing with his possessions, his remains. With Sam being dead, it's a loss because I couldn't go back and check details with him.
Sam Little may have provided much needed closure to both law enforcement and the victims' loved ones, but in the end, it never changed who he was or what he did.
Mr. Little is not sorry about anything that he did. He was, at one point, trying to say that he felt bad for the women that he killed. He had nothing to say about the families and the devastation that he caused across America. He was a parasite, and he deserves to be where he is right now, in the grave where he sent so many women.
And that's our story on the shocking, terrifying, and tragic case of Samuel Little. One we had never seen before, and hopefully one we never see again. That's all we have for you here on Prime Crime. Leave us your comments on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us. And until next time, be safe.